is fun. If you love what you do, then it's not really a job. And I think I love doing this. I love being a communicator, and this is the pinnacle of any communicator's job.
Is it fun to run right into the hurricane? To have the controversy and the pushback and the demonstrations and the Saturday briefing?
Well, I don't know that I would call that fun. But I believe that if you believe in something and you're fighting for what you believe in and you're fighting to get it right, then there's an element of fun, I guess you'd say, for it. But I don't look at this as fun. I look at this as a sort of a cause and a movement that you think that you're doing the right thing for. I enjoy it. I wish that, I think anything that you do, you would have more people with you than against you, or a narrative going completely with you than against you. But it's also a challenge, and that's what makes it, as a communicator, if it was all, lollipops and rainbows, that wouldn't make it challenging. What makes it challenging is explaining complex ideas in a way that every American can understand why you're doing what you're doing.
So that's what we'll do in our
Great.
few minutes here, to try to get to some of the ideas that you tried to explain, how it's going and why it's going the way it has. So let's just dive in, all right? And
sure.
Why not? And let's start with what is grabbing, disturbing so much of the country, which is this refugee ban. You're the press secretary and the communications director, so you're really trying to do more than just talk to the media, but also talk to the country and to the world in many ways, and to inform people. This thing was rolled out without typical briefings that happen for the media, without fact sheets, without background conversations, so the media, when they were doing their job, couldn't issue some of the clarifying information, and therefore there was this enormous sense of uncertainty, fear, chaos, and it's not just a communications issue. I mean, there's a lot else going on. Did that contribute to it? Was that part of the problem? Is that something to fix going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big difference. This particular case was done in a way that if you're going to announce travel restrictions to protect the country, if you announce them and telegraph them 2 days, 5 hours, whatever, you can undermine the success of the program. I think it was a very unique case in how we had to do it. Because you're right. I mean, normally you would sit there and say, okay, this is the rollout plan. This is when we're going to do it. Here's our surrogates. They're going to be out there.
Did you plan and did you anticipate that there was going to be the kind of chaos that there was? Was that something you wanted to see?
No. Of course we didn't want to see it. I think we've tried. We've held several background briefings right off the bat. I think there was a lot of this, to be honest, was blown out of proportion. I mean, I think when people understand the statistics and what's happening, so let me just walk through the TikTok. One, the ban deals with 7 countries that the Obama administration had previously identified as needing further travel restrictions. 2, in the 24-hour period following the implementation of the executive order, 325,000 people came to this country through our airports in 24 hours. 109 of them were stopped for additional screening. 109 out of 325,000.
But I can tell you.
And then you look at the poll that came out today, up to 57% of the American people believe it. So I think what happens is sometimes you can go to these airports, and frankly, it was more of a question of, remember, we're talking 109 people nationwide that came in, that were caught in the midst of the executive order. Hold on. And my point is that when you look at the proportion of that, and what that took, name me another program that you can get that level of success. I mean, you've got, in terms of its implementation.
I take your point, but 109 people, or whatever the number is, for sure, but thousands of people were disrupted by it. Google was recalling its employees from around the world. I was at a board meeting of another school where a faculty member was was on sabbatical in Tehran, and they all worried about whether he was going to be able to get out or not. There's been retaliation now by Iran, Iraq. There's much more that happened here than what happened to 107 or 109 people.
Right. And I think, as you saw, by the time that we went through a 24-hour period where the implementation process went through, it all settled down. I mean, it was an initial churn that occurred because of it. But at the end of the day, what was the other option? To rush it out quickly and to telegraph it 5 days so that people could rush into this country and undermine the safety of our nation.
If this was so urgent and you needed to address so urgently keeping people out who would do us harm, and I know you've been asked this before, but for the
Right.
explanation to this room, why then not Saudi Arabia, where the hijackers came from who flew into buildings?
And maybe
Why
we
not
will,
Pakistan,
and maybe
where-
we will
where so
expand the
much-
list, but the bottom line is, we started with the 7 countries that had previously been identified, did a 90-day review. Maybe during that 90-day review, we find other countries, or we take someone off, or whatever, but it is a review process. And at the end of the day, it's always, everyone's saying, well, how did you have to go today? Why couldn't you have waited another day? We don't know when the next threat faces this country. We don't know when the next terrorist is going to enter this country. We don't know when the next bomb's going to go off. And the last thing that you want to do is to say, well, we could have done this Saturday, but we waited one more day, or we wanted to roll it out differently, and someone's life got lost. At that point, what do you tell those people? Why didn't you go a day earlier?
What do you say, though, to that Iraqi who translated for the U.S. military for 10 years, who couldn't get in? What do you say to the mother of the Syrian child whose husband or son was murdered in Syria and was looking for refuge in this country? How do you communicate to those people who see a cold shoulder from the United States?
Well, I think there's a couple things. Number one, you saw one of those individuals was interviewed and said, I support what's going on. I mean, and that just, one of the interpreters said, I understand that the United States has to protect its borders first, and I understand this, and it was an inconvenience, but I still support Donald Trump. I think that this idea that everyone's got to be offended, the second thing is, this is, our number one priority as a government and as leaders is to protect the 324 million people who live in this country. And so I understand that people may be inconvenienced a little coming into the nation. But this is our nation, our country. Our first and foremost responsibility is to our people. And if people want to come to this country and visit or travel or study, then we welcome them. We've always been a welcoming country. But the idea that we should just have an open door and let people in willy-nilly is ridiculous.
But it hasn't been a completely open door. I mean, there's a really interesting piece that I pulled here, and I was looking through it, on what it takes and what it has taken in the past for refugees entering the United States. And there are multiple screenings, multiple interviews, multiple fingerprints.
But
So it's
Frank,
not
I
like
guess
it's
my
been a
point, but at some point,
if I may,
yeah.
when you stand there as the communication director and the press secretary, when you talk about an open door and that there haven't been it hasn't been an
No,
open door.
I said you don't treat it like an open door. The point is that at some point you've got to look at the families who lose somebody in an attack or in a bombing and say, could we have done more to save them? Could another event be prevented through additional screening? And if the answer is yes, and you didn't do something, then that's shame on us.
One of the things I asked you just a moment ago in terms of, you're rolling out a lot of stuff, whether it's the immigration ban or building the wall or possible tariffs or whatever else has been.
Or bringing back jobs, or cutting
Bringing
down
back
regulation,
jobs,
or
making-
instituting a lobbying ban.
Okay.
I mean,
Fair
yeah.
enough, fair enough.
But
Point is
here's
that-
the thing,
point
no, but the point is this, and this is kind of, because you want to cover media, it's always, the lead is always the perceived negative. How about all of the jobs that he's saving? How about all of the money that he's saving for tax dollars through negotiation
That's a fair point.
I know.
It's a fair point, and I'll come back to that, and I'm going to come back to that with them.
But it's
the
never,
quest-
it's never lead with the positive, it's always lead with the perceived negative.
Well, that is part of the problem. I mean, I actually would agree with you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we need to do a better job, and maybe that's why public opinion is so low on sorts of things. But I could actually turn that back on you and say, why did Donald Trump run a campaign that was all built on the negative?
I don't think it was.
What?
But again, you have a guy whose slogan is "Make America Great Again." He's out there talking about middle-class workers, fighting for their wages, fighting
He's
for
talking
better
about
health
carnage
care,
on American streets. He's talking about,
making America safer. I mean, again, it's always the negative. What about the positive? What about focusing on the jobs that he's bringing home, the workers that he's fighting for?
That's fair enough, and that is the marketplace of ideas. That's where you live as a communications director and the press
Right.
secretary. It's what they do as journalists and how they have to sift through it all. The question I was going to come back to, though, is with all these things, negative, positive,
Right.
whatever they are, ambitious and complicated, as you roll them out, will you be communicating more completely
I think
with the media for the kinds of information they need, or do you think they're not necessary in this?
Oh, no,
equation?
100%. Look, I think over the course of this weekend, we held at least 2 background briefings for reporters. We've brought them into every meeting. And I think if you ask, I know Jeff represents both Reuters and as the president of the White House Correspondents Association, I think you can ask him. You should ask him, how much access have we given them previous to the Obama administration. I think we have shown an abundance of access in trying to get the press involved. I know they always want more. That's Jeff's job. He does a great job of advocating for it. But I think that we have shown a willingness to engage with the press and to bring them, every morning, the schedule or the meetings that the president have, we bring the pool in. He is engaged with them. We have shown a tremendous willingness to engage with the press. But I think that it's not this binary choice, them or not. We posted, for the first time ever, we debuted the weekly address on Facebook Live today. I think we ended up with like 11 million views right off that alone. And I think that one of the things that this president in particular is through the various social media accounts is somewhere in the 50 million plus now, where he can reach individuals and take a message directly to them. The press plays a very healthy role in a democracy, no question about it. But they're not the only game in town anymore.
So I'm really glad to hear you say that, and I want to ask you. So you say the press plays a healthy role. The president says he's got a running war with the press. Steve Bannon told the New York Times the media should be embarrassed and humiliated and keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while. You think the media should keep its mouth shut? Is that their job?
No, I think, well, they can certainly write. But I think that that was a joke.
Should they keep their mouth shut?
No, look, I think that what Steve... If you focus on some of the... Look, I'm all for, and I said this in a briefing last Monday, that if we're wrong, call it out. If you think that... But there is never... everything, you take this national security thing for an entire National Security Council, the identical language is in the 2017 stand-up of the National Security.
I want to ask you about that.
Hold on.
I want to come back, but I want to stay
an entire
Steve.
headlines on one network today that talked about how we're pulling out the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and downgrading them. That is just, it's wrong, it's insulting, and it's just, the idea of calling it journalism is pathetic.
Well, let me come back to that, and I will in a minute, but I want to stay on Steve Bannon. Steve said the media should feel embarrassed, humiliated, and keep its mouth shut. He said the media are the opposition party. He said the media has zero integrity, zero intelligence, and no hard work. Is that showing respect for the media?
That's, I think Steve's position is very clear on what he thinks of the media.
Is your position Steve's position?
No. I'm the press secretary. Steve was sharing his view of the media, and I think after you seeing some of the things that have been covered the way they have, I understand it. And he has a right to his opinion, as all of us do. But I think that when you see, Steve has worked really hard with the president, both during the campaign, the transition, to implement some really great ideas and policies that I think are helping Americans. He understands and fights for the working class Americans out there who haven't had their voices heard. And I think a lot of times when you pick up the paper or stare up at the TV and you see the headlines or the chyrons, and you realize that they're not even being straight, it is unbelievably disappointing.
You just shared a place where you disagree with him. I'd like to ask you about that.
No, I didn't say, you asked me if my view was his view. I'm not disagreeing that he's got a point. I'm saying that that's his view.
You're good at this. But if that's what he believes and you don't believe it, I'm not trying to create a conflict, but my observation would be...
I'm not trying to say there is one either.
I see.
My point is
I'm sure you're not. So let me ask you this. These are really complicated issues across the board. Kellyanne Conway, in an interview with the Washington Post, observed that leaders need people around them who can say no, who can say, this is not a good idea, this isn't working. Have you said that to Donald Trump?
Absolutely.
About what?
I'm not going to tell you about the private conversations I have with the president.
About what general
He'll ask
topic?
me my opinion all the time on whether we should do something or not. I'll share my opinion with him, and then he makes a decision. My job is to provide him with my best counsel as well as everyone else, Kellyanne, Steve, Reince Priebus, Jared Kushner, Hope Hicks. We provide our opinions with him. He's the president. He ultimately decides, and then our job is to execute his decision.
Word is that you were ordered out on Saturday after the inaugural to complain or to observe, or whatever verb you want to use, about the size of the crowds. Did you say, no, I'm not doing that?
No, if I said no, I did not say no, of course not. The president asked me we created a strategy on how to deal with the current media cycle that was going on, and I implemented it.
Do you regret that?
I'm a forward thinker.
I take that to be a yes?
No, I think that you can look back on everything. I probably should have taken questions that day. when we woke up that Saturday, we had an amazing inaugural. I think the president's speech was phenomenal. I was really proud of the way that what he communicated to the American people that he wanted to do and the vision that he wanted to enact, and I think it was unbelievably disappointing to wake up and see some of the focus where it was. So that wasn't the media cycle that we wanted to have in the issue topic, because I think he had done such an amazing job, and it was such an amazing day for him and his family. But I believe, look, I look at every event that I do, and I go back. Today's briefing, the first thing I did is I go back, we gather with the team. What issues did we do well? Where do we have to clean up? What do we have to tighten up? I think that regardless of the job that you do, if you don't go back and reflect, can I do that better? It doesn't matter what you do. If you write a paper for a class and you go back, if you don't take that feedback and say, I could have constructed this better, I could have made this argument better, I should have proofread, whatever it is. But I think self-reflection and self-critique, as well as asking others to do the same, obviously I've looked at my suit choice and, made some changes there. But so, I get plenty of fashion tips now based on Saturday. So in that respect, absolutely.
I have a question from a student that I'd like to share with you, Zoe Spielvogel. And she asked, if you were asked by President Trump or other members of the administration to make a statement you knew to be untrue, how would you respond to the president? Would you still make the statement?
If it was demonstrably false, no. I would explain to the president that here's why this doesn't make sense.
Well, weren't the inaugural crowds demonstrably false?
No,
Not the worldwide thing.
But that's, again, and I wish I could sit here and pull the exact phraseology up, but what I said at that time was in person and viewership. I said the audience was, and it still is. Here's the thing that's so funny about this, Frank. 16.9 million people watched it on CNN.com alone. 4.1 million people watched it on Twitter, live streamed it on Twitter, and the sites go on and on and on. Then 31 people watched it according to Nielsen. What numbers did, hold on, just let me answer the question.
You weren't making that completely crystal clear in that briefing, though.
Okay, I think I did. I think if you look at the statement where I said the audience size in person and whatever it was, and then when I said it on Monday, I added it up again. Show me the numbers that show that viewership wasn't at an all-time high. I can show you that gets us to to a number that no one can come close to. And yet, again, this goes back to what I said at the beginning. Where's the default? It's always, no, you didn't do this, you couldn't do this.
But that goes with the job.
No.
That goes with the job.
But again, no, I'm fine.
When I covered the White House, you cover a presidential speech and you say, here's what he said. Part of that story is, here's what he didn't say.
Fair
People
enough.
parse your words.
And I
That's
think
what comes with the
sure,
territory,
understand.
right? People parse your words.
I understand that. But tell me where I was wrong. The numbers add up into the 50, 60, 70 million, depending on if you keep counting the sites, how many people watched it. Show me another number from another inauguration that is greater than that. The default that you presume and everyone else in that briefing room was, I'm wrong until I prove them otherwise.
No, the default was that you were talking about the crowd on the ground.
No, but,
right.
Okay, but that's not what I said. I said audience. Look, your facial you're...
No, but...
Look,
shame on me for facial gestures. I won't do that again.
No, but
I promise. I
smile. There you go. I like that one.
All right. Let's try this. Let's try this.
I
this isn't
that
for
was
me.
A smile. That's a good one. I like that.
I'm glad you do.
There you go.
It's all about, So David Axelrod wrote this piece on CNN this morning. I woke up this morning, he wrote, as an alternative fact. In justifying the appointment of Steve Bannon, he writes, the president's chief of strategist to the National Security Council, Trump spokesman Sean Spicer cited my role in the Obama White House as a precedent. Spicer said, I and Press Secretary Robert Gibbs attended classified national security meetings, quote, all the time. This is simply not true, he wrote. I was not a member of the committee. I did not speak or participate. I sat on the sidelines as a silent observer with Gibbs because we'd be called upon publicly to discuss the president's decision. He says he was not active and you misrepresented it. Your response?
By his own admission, he attended briefings.
But he was not on the National Council.
Okay, so let's get this straight. So he wasn't a part, according to his statement, he was not a member of the National Security Council, but he attended them. So what did we do? We actually put it in paper and said that Steve's going to be able to attend them. We were transparent about it. And now we're being criticized because we actually did what they didn't do.
No, I'm not criticizing.
The most transparent administration in history didn't have him listed as a member of the National Security Council. He attended them, And then we actually said, hey, if we're going to have one of the people go in and out of meetings, they should be on the piece of paper. And so for us actually being open, honest, and transparent, we're getting criticized from the most transparent administration in history that didn't list him going in and out of meetings unless media reports reported him, which is where it came from.
I'm a little confused here in terms of whether he's attending or he's on the council, and isn't there a difference?
Well, he has the ability to go in and out of the meetings. The idea is that instead of having someone float in and out without anybody knowing, we would list the people who would be attending the hearing. He is listed as being able to attend. There are 4 people that can attend the meetings.
What kind of relationship do you want with the press corps?
An honest one.
What does that mean?
It means that they've got to do their job. I understand it, and I truly believe this. I think the press is part of a healthy democracy. That's what separates our country from so many around the world. I traveled the world when I was the assistant U.S. trade rep, and you'd go into some countries and watch how they interacted with the media. And some days I liked it, but it was, it was what makes our country great. You've got, far left, far right, independent, freelance people, media papers, online blogs. It's a beautiful thing about our country. You can say what you want. But I also don't want to just let facts get thrown away and get stories written. And, when I'm up there, I'm a liar. When they do it, it's a correction at the bottom. And they go, oh, sorry, we didn't call for comment, or what we meant was. I think that there is an unbelievable double standard. When the administration doesn't fully explain something, we're liars and we're misleading. We have no integrity. When they do it, they put this story has been updated at the bottom.
Well, there's a difference between an error that needs to be corrected and a statement from a public official, which is supposed to be, and you want to be true, right? You want to be judged by your truth and credibility.
And I would assume that a journalist would like to be truthful as well.
Well, of course, everybody does, but
sure.
I'm not saying there isn't bad reporting. There is. I'm not saying that there aren't slants. There are. I am not saying there aren't errors. But we talk about the media like it's a singular. The word is plural and covers a vast range of media. So what kind of relationship do you want with media, and do you embrace media that you view as critical?
Absolutely. I would go to the briefing room every day.
Is CNN being frozen out?
No.
Is CNN for the last couple of weeks, as I understand it, has asked for a guest, for example, on their Sunday talk show. And
right, but I think there's a big difference between, they've had questions, Jim Acosta, despite some of the stuff that he's done, got a question in the Monday briefing.
What do you mean, despite some of the stuff?
I think he misrepresented the facts of the press briefing at Trump Tower. Not just misled, I think he was completely, I don't want to use certain words, I would say that he misled viewers tremendously.
Well, let me just say, for our television audience and others, Jim Acosta is here, and when
right,
he's
but
up
your
here,
question
I'll ask,
was fair enough.
I just want to make it clear that he's going to have a chance to respond for himself.
He should, because look, so there's 2 questions. One is, they aren't being frozen out. They got to ask questions, but I'm not.
But is there retaliation?
No, there's not retaliation, but I'm not going to sit around and engage with people who have no desire to actually get something right. In the case of Jim at the Trump Tower press conference, at the end of the press conference, he twice interrupted the president-elect of the United States. I went up to Jim at the end of that press conference, after it was over, after the president-elect had gone up in the elevator, and told him that I thought his behavior was unacceptable, and it was. And it was rude, and it was disrespectful. Jim told me that he went off on a rant 3 or 4 times. We had an exchange, and at the end I told him, I said, if you behave like that again, we will have you removed, like if you're going to act like a protester. Jim then went on air and said, in the middle of the press conference, I went over to him and said, if he continues to ask tough questions, he'll be removed. That's not what you did. I'll pull the quote for you, Jim.
Right. So we're going to have a full conversation. But here, my point to you is this, and the question is very simple. You are going to have tough reporters in that press room.
They should be tough.
Then they are going to ask tough reporters of the president. And if the president is not going to acknowledge them, and you're not going to work with them,
I just said I acknowledged them.
I understand. This goes to the core of whether and how you're working with independent, accredited
okay, so let's
journalists
stop.
From a variety of perspectives, right?
On Monday, I briefed for 90 minutes, okay? I took, I don't know, what was it, 50-something odd questions. NBC, ABC, I don't know how many, there were 49 seats in there. The room's been packed every day with another, you can ask Jeff for the numbers. I don't know what they were along the sides or whatever, but it's packed. I was there for almost 70 minutes today. I took questions from far-left organizations, quote-unquote mainstream organizations, a Christian broadcast network, a foreign. At some point, I get it that everyone thinks that they're entitled to a question, but I was there. We did 2 background briefings this weekend. CNN was represented in both meetings. I'm not sure where this sense of entitlement comes, that they get a question, they get a seat. At some point, I don't know, where this sense of media entitlement comes from. My job is to make sure that we're communicating effectively, efficiently. We've gone above and beyond to make sure that reporters get access, get information, that they're briefed, that we do calls. And it's, and so, I get it that everybody wants something, but I think that we have been extremely generous with our time and access.
Let me pose the question slightly differently. I mentioned to you earlier some of the comments from Steve Bannon about this being an opposition, the media are an opposition party, they have zero integrity, intelligence, and all the rest. Certainly some of the comments from the president himself, that this is the most dishonest group of people, that he can imagine. The director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Joel Simon, said recently, and I'm quoting him here, this kind of speech not only undermines the work of the media in this country, it emboldens autocratic leaders around the world. These leaders like Putin in Russia and Erdogan in Turkey have consolidated power by marginalizing independent media. We can't allow that to happen in the United States. Will you make a commitment now and here that as White House Press Secretary and Communication Director, you will not be party to efforts to marginalize, and I'll add the word, demonize independent media?
What do you mean by independent media? You mean like networks and...
I mean...
I guess my question is, give me an example of what we have done to bring up the question.
Well, I just cited what Joel
I understand,
said,
but right, so it's a nice fluffy statement. Explain to me, give me one example of how we've done that.
Well, when the President of the United States goes to the CIA and stands there and says to people who are combating terrorism around the world that the enemy essentially is this row of dishonest people, and this is the President who has sworn to uphold the Constitution, including the First Amendment, with a snarky press. Thomas Jefferson thought it was a snarky press. That undermines faith and confidence, it seems to me, in the institution of the media. Not the individuals, but the institution. Don't you see how that's damaging? Don't you see how that's
at some point, though, there's an obligation of the media to get the facts right.
I couldn't agree more.
But where's the self... I guess it's always
Sean,
about...
I agree with that.
Okay.
I also agree that you have every right and responsibility when something's wrong to point that out. I got calls when I was bureau chief at CNN from White House press secretaries screaming at me because we got something wrong, and then we had to figure out whether we did or not. That's different than an ongoing running attack on the media as an institution. Is it not?
Well, and I think that by and large, when people consistently get things wrong, we have an obligation to make sure that people get the facts right. I mean, I just cited one. We spent an entire weekend talking about the Director of National Intelligence and the Joint Chiefs of Staff being downgraded from the National Security Council. 100% false. I called bureaus, I called reporters, and it was like, well, yeah, I guess you're right. None of them admitted to even reading the executive order, or excuse me, the order standing up the NSC. At some point, it's always what we need to do. At some point, I think there's a bit of reflection that the media needs to do to figure out if they're getting basic facts right. The other day, by the way, just to give you an example, the story that came out, I didn't bring a single box into the White House until Sunday afternoon. Now, I know that sounds like a simple and petty fact, but if you can't get something as simple like that right, then it shows that how much are you really trying to get the facts right. The basic facts of many of these stories have unbelievable errors in them.
I mean, we could go back and forth on this all night, and I don't want to do that, but those simple basic facts apply both ways. Here's a list of the enemy, perhaps, the Washington Post published it, President Trump's first 7 days of false claims, inaccurate statements, and exaggerations. I'm sure you saw that, too. And there's some pretty basic facts there that he didn't get right. So,
but again, I guess my question is, we're not, I've said it, I said it from the briefing room last Monday, we're not perfect. We're not going to get everything right. But there's a big difference between constantly having a negative mindset about everything, what we got wrong, what we didn't do right, as opposed to, at some point, what did he get done in his first week? How many jobs did he save? How much tax dollars did he save? How many foreign leaders did he reset relationships with? But it's never about the good. The default is consistently about the bad. And again, there's this idea, the press should be skeptical. It's healthy. It's part of what they do. But there's a big difference between a skeptical press that says, show it to me, and the default of always being negative.
I know you need to go in just a couple of minutes, so I want to button this up and just do a couple of things and then say thank you. what would your recipe be for changing that default position to the negative while still playing the role of adversary and holding power to account?
Well, I don't think it's an adversarial role. I don't think you go in saying, I'm going to be, I think that the idea...
Respectful adversary.
Right, but again, I don't even look at it that way. My job is to provide the information. If someone wants to get it right, and I think that there's a whole host of reporters that will say, if they're taking the time to work through a story, we've provided sources with them, we've provided background, and again, a lot of times we'll say, hey, can you hold off an hour on that? We think we can get it right for you. I think reporters that try to do their job well, and there are, a number of them, that we work with them and try to get that story right. So my job is to figure out if people want to have a relationship where we're giving them facts, they're reporting them out. And again, I get it. There's analysis that can go on where they brought in an expert on this or that and says, our analysis shows the following. That's totally what's supposed to happen. But the idea is that too many journalists have crossed the line becoming reporters to becoming opinion writers, where they start talking about facts that they, the outcomes that they assume will happen, as opposed to an analysis that has been proven or shown by an outside expert or a think tank or some kind of academia. So I look at this purely as my job is to help facilitate the flow of information out, but to make sure that that flow, once it gets through the media, is done in a way that is accurate.
A couple of things before we let you go. White House press briefing room and White House presence on the White House grounds. Been there since McKinley. No, there was some discussion. They're there for now. They're there to stay.
For now.
They're there to stay.
That's not my decision to make. I mean, for right now, I think we're working well in the briefing room.
Do you want them there? Do you think having them on the premises is a good thing?
On the premises, sure. But I think there's a difference.
In the White House.
Right now, my question is the first thing.
I want to know how we're defining on the premises.
Let me answer the question. The first day I get there, I took a tour, and I'm walking through, and they say, I kept hearing report after report, look at how cramped we are in here. So we looked at a couple options. Right now, we're not planning on doing anything. But the idea is the reporters love to tell you how cramped they are, and then we talk about additional space. It's like, well, we don't want to move. Okay, well, so I get hit for talking about, hey, there's a couple potential places that we could move, the briefing room to allow more seats. We can have additional space. Nothing's been decided. I have a healthy relationship with the Correspondents Association. I've told Jeff and others that we would have a meeting if we ever had ideas to do this. Nothing's changing, but we thought outside the box initially and said, hey, and I talked to Jeff and his team about potential options that we could do, ways to expand the number of journalists that get in there, ways to mix it up a little. We're trying to bring in more voices, not less.
President Trump going to go to the White House Correspondents Association?
I don't know. We're 6 days in. We really haven't gotten
Traditions are good.
I understand that, but that shouldn't, the idea that that's a priority.
I'm not saying it's a priority. My God, it's not a priority given what's going on in the world, all right? It's just that we're chatting.
I know, but I just think that, of all of the things that are going on in the world, worrying about a dinner in April...
Right, it's just about, and maybe this is where we conclude.
That'd be great.
The relationship...
I don't know that I need to do a briefing tomorrow.
That's okay. No, it's not. Do the briefing. That's not where I want to be on that one. What is the relationship that this president wants to have with this press corps in its range, diversity, and skepticism?
Look, I think this, in terms of not just his relationship with the press, with the American people, I think this president's committed to showing people showing a lot of this through action, indeed. And I think when you look at how he's treated the press corps so far, we've brought them into most major meetings. We've given them access to, we brought the press up front on Air Force One, which is something that I understand hasn't done that. I mean, we have tried to go above and beyond, and we're going to continue to do that. The irony of a lot of the questions you're asking me is I think when you look at the deeds that we've done the last couple of weeks, both in terms of briefings and in access, Jeff's job is to advocate for as much as possible. And as I said earlier, he does a phenomenal job of doing that on behalf of his brethren in the briefing room and as part of the association. But I think when you compare to what we've done with others in the past, I think we've done a very good job. And so it's ironic in a way that when you're asking about this, you look at what we've actually done since he's been inaugurated, and I think it's been above and beyond.
What last thought would you like to leave this room and our audience with?
Well, I would go back to what I just said. I think the president is deeply committed to making this country a better place, to helping lift up Americans' lives, to lowering their health care costs. He really cares deeply about this. And I think you can see already he's a man of action. You can disagree with his agenda. I get that. That's what makes this country so amazing. But at the end of the day, please don't question his motives. He truly cares about making this country better for every single American and uniting us. And I think that as we continue to watch him in the next weeks, months, and years, I hope people give him a chance to show that. Because when he brings these people in to meet with him, as he did throughout the transition in the first couple of weeks, it's amazing to watch these individuals walk out of a meeting who've never met him before, have never interacted with him before. It is usually a very, very different impression when they understand how much he cares and what's in his heart.
The world that you're dealing with and the world that they're dealing with is a world of instant information, instant opinion, constant conversation through social media and all the rest. It makes communicating these things so much more difficult. I really want to thank you for coming over here and spending some time and taking my snarky questions and resolving all of this.
You still got it.
Categorically, yeah, right? And I hope you'll come back and join us again and engage the debate frontally like this.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you very much. And before you go, I mean, this one small little thing. What is this business about chewing gum and swallowing 20 pieces of gum a day?
Of all the habits that anyone could have, I like cinnamon gum. Guilty.
I'm going to look for some correlation there with the rest of the world, but I'm not sure we'll find it. Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.